Good Thanksgiving Eve to you all. Travel safely if you're on the road this morning early and traffic will be awful and airports will be awful. Just be patient. We have no problems in the United States that we cannot solve. Lots of places in the world have terrible problems. We do have a ceasefire in Lebanon. I'll be talking with Matt Continetti about that a little bit later. We have a vice president who is perhaps breaking down. I'm going to talk with Mary Katharine Ham about that a little bit later. A lot going on. But before I go to the news, let me say nothing says Thanksgiving like carrying a dead weight Genghis cape up many flights of stairs. Because my son-in-law is deployed, so my daughter drove the kids up from Southern Virginia. And Genghis cape normally is pretty easy to carry, but as you know, if you take a child who's dead asleep out of a car seat and carry them, it's like a sack of potatoes times two. Then I had to do it with Teddy T-Rex. So my relief factor was very, very well advised. I'll tell you about that next segment. But nothing says Thanksgiving like sleeping children being carried up and down. All day today, playground day. Luckily, we have good weather inside the Beltway. All day tomorrow, I'll be traveling. I'll spend a little bit of Thanksgiving with the family, and then I'll be traveling as my friend Dennis Prager recovers from his back injury. I'm going to go take the first half of Dennis's cruise, and then Mike Gallagher is going to take the second half of Dennis's cruise. So my Thanksgiving tomorrow will be a couple of rolls and out the door, but I'm going to be blessed by the presence of my grandchildren for 48 hours, and that's a great blessing. I have no complaints. And if you want to send a get well card to Dennis, we have a banner over at HughHewitt.com. Please do it there. We know it gets to him. I want to begin with the great, big, wonderful news. You remember COVID, sort of. Same way I kind of remember COVID. I was flying home from Hawaii in March of 2000, and what year? 20? And Tom Cotton had been on the show in January warning about Wuhan, and I was warning about Wuhan, but I didn't know that it was going to be that bad, and dropped the fetching Mrs. Hewitt off in California, proceeded to D.C., and then the airline shut down. So I was for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I can't remember, by myself eating pizza, takeout pizza, and basically listening to everything Fauci and Collins said, and I really believed them both because I thought the public health authorities do what they say. Well, they were wrong. They were absolutely wrong about everything. Not everything, but nearly everything, and they misled the American people, and they misled me. So one voice rang out loud and clear. Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford, one of the original authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, and he has been named to run the National Institute of Health, replacing Francis Collins, who's a very good man. He was just wrong and duped, I think, by Tony Fauci during that process. President-elect Trump named Jay Bhattacharya yesterday, and I'm doing jumping jacks. This is great. Dr. Bhattacharya, or Dr. B, as I call him, was on the program in June, and we talked about the need for a public health system that is credible, cut number 22.
Well, my main argument during COVID is that we had to take account of the basic epidemiological facts about it in designing our policy. And that is that it was, well, there's two really. One, that there is a enormous age gradient in the risk of dying from COVID if you get COVID, right? It's older people primarily that have died. It's 80% of the deaths are people over 65. And whereas children face minuscule risk relative to other risks in their lives. That's fact one. I think nobody disagrees with that. Fact two is that the lockdowns that we employed are harmful. They're really, really deeply harmful, particularly to children, particularly to the poor, particularly to the working class. They are harmful. I've called them trickle-down epidemiology. The theory seems to be that if we protect, relatively well-off people, that we'll protect everybody. But in fact, that's not true. The disease spread despite the lockdowns, and the lockdowns caused tremendous. I mean, we can go through some of the litany of the harms they're caused, but it's catastrophic. I can't think of any public health intervention in modern history, certainly outside of wartime, that have had the same kind of catastrophic effects, including large numbers of people around the world thrown into poverty, starvation. It's just heartbreaking, Hugh. So if you put those two facts together, the right policy always was and still is focus protection of vulnerable people, older people, primarily, whatever technologies we have.
Focus
Could have been vaccinated.
protection.
It was.
That is the key. Then we came to the $1,000 question. What do we do about public health agency credibility, which is in tatters? No, there's dengue fever in Texas this morning. I was talking about last night with my friend Hank, who had dengue fever from Bora Bora years ago. It's a pretty bad fever and mosquito borne, and it's in Texas. I don't know if it's a problem or not, but who are we going to believe? I will believe Dr. J if he tells us to be worried, and he hasn't told us to be worried. How do we get credibility back? How badly was it dented? Cut number 23. The issue for me now is what do we do to rebuild public health credibility? Because do you agree with me? It's shattered. It's in shreds. What do you think of U.S. Public Health Authority credibility right now?
I entirely agree with you. It is absolutely it's in the lowest point I've ever seen in my professional career, and unfortunately, I have to say it's well deserved that it's in shreds. Over and over, the top public health authorities in this country, including Tony Fauci, I mean, it's understandable. You are put in this position where you have to be the spokesperson for the entire all of public health, and you have a disease that's where the knowledge about it is rapidly coming in. It's like new things are coming in all the time, and so it's hard to stay up. I mean, it's hard. It's been hard enough for me to stay up, and I'm not facing that kind of public scrutiny as he was facing. At that point, you have to be honest about what you know and you don't know, and you cannot manipulate the public. And unfortunately, that's exactly what Tony Fauci did from almost the first moment of the pandemic. Right? If you look at FOIA emails early on from January 2020 between him and Francis Collins, they're basically organizing a cover up about where this virus came from, about the possibility of a lab leak. They destroyed the careers or attempted to destroy the careers of anyone who suggested it was a lab leak, calling it a conspiracy theory. Then later, just shortly afterwards, in February 2020, Tony Fauci got on TV and said that you shouldn't wear masks. You don't need masks. Actually, he was reflecting the honest consensus then of all scientists, or most scientists. If you looked at the randomized trial evidence before the pandemic regarding masks and the spread of influenza, the conclusion was that you don't have any evidence that it actually works. Masking, not like, if you're masking by someone, a trained surgeon wearing a mask in a surgical setting. I mean, that's a very different thing, right? So he was telling the truth then, but then a month later, he turns around and says, "Oh no, I was lying to you. I was lying to you because I wanted to protect hospital workers." Well, I mean, once you've admitted that, you've lost credibility. And then you had people. Then there was in mid-July. There were actually people in the United States who were pretty solid on school opening, reflecting what had happened in Europe, in Sweden and Iceland and elsewhere. And people were in favor of school opening. All of a sudden, it seemed like on a dime it would turn against school opening, not based on any real data that had come out, but it looked to me like basically a political switch, as if it was as using kids to get at Donald Trump, make him make his re-election chances worse. I mean, I think so. There was that element of noble lies, that element of politicization. Then there was the BLM protests, right? So the Sturgis bike rally happens, and Republicans gathering to celebrate Harleys is dangerous, but then Democrats gathering to protest. Actually, it wasn't just Democrats. Lots of people gathering to protest racial injustice is somehow okay. And you have public health signing a letter, 1,000 people in public health signing letters saying that that's okay for public health, but not the other protests.
He's fabulous. The entire interview is at Hugh Hewitt. Go look up Hugh Hewitt, J. Bhattacharya. He's fabulous. It's a great pick. Also want to do one more thing. I got my Christmas present yesterday because I'm going to go on this cruise for Dennis. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, this is a Cleveland Browns sea bag. So I'm going to take this with me on the cruise to the Caribbean. Everyone's going to want it. I'm going to have to tether it to my arm because the NFL entered into a license agreement with seabags.com. And this is the best Christmas present for everyone, especially Steelers fans. I want everyone out there who knows a Steelers fan to go and order the Cleveland Browns sea bags at seabags.com and send it to them as a thank you for putting Donald Trump back in the White House and Dave McCormick in the Senate. The Buckeyes versus that team up north. I'm not sure Matt Continetti of AEI and the commentary pod picks a side in this classic matchup. Matt, do you pick a side in this classic matchup?
In this matchup where I have no stake in the game, Hugh, I side with you. So I
Thank
am
you.
rooting
Thank
for
you.
Ohio State. Yes.
Great,
Looking
great.
forward
Now,
to
I
it.
want to test your physics knowledge because it comes important. Question number one for Matt Continetti.
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
Do you know that, Matt?
No, I don't. Is
All
it
right.
Monty Python?
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
from the Holy Grail. John Podhortz would
That's
know.
right.
Second question.
Right.
You have a
Yes.
5-year-old or somewhere around there, right?
They're older than that now, but I have had a 5-year-old, yes.
All right. So I have a physics question. My grandchild arrived last night. All four of them came, and my son-in-law is deployed. So I got charged with getting the 5-year-old out of the car seat and up to the stairs to bed. Why do 5-year-olds increase in poundage by a factor of 3 when they're dead asleep?
No, that's true. Actually, I think it's kind of comforting. I thought it was always nice to have that feeling when the baby's asleep on your shoulder and it's like kind of a blanket or something like that. My kids are a little bit older now, so I don't get that feeling as much. I have to
There's
drive them.
nothing
That's
as
my real
asleep
job is
as
driving them from sporting event to sporting event.
You spend every Saturday morning at a soccer field or a
Oh, a
baseball
baseball
field
diamond. Yeah, and yeah,
baseball
absolutely.
diamond. God, did you have to do T-ball, which should be illegal? I'm asking for that to be in the reconciliation package, the banning of
T-ball is
T-ball.
fun. My son, he was such an enthusiastic baseball player, still is. But when he was playing T-ball, it wouldn't matter where the manager put him on the field. He would chase the ball wherever. So he could be at first base, but next thing you know, if the play is in left field, that's where 5-year-old son Continetti is. So that was
You know,
enjoyable.
it's enjoyable for like half an hour, but a T-ball game it might still be going on. I just think it
That's
should be in the budget reconciliation pack. Okay, let's get serious. The ceasefire. Last night, I was on with Leland Vittert on News Nation, and Leland played the clip of Joe Biden saying, "This brings to a close the conflict in Lebanon." And I almost jumped out of my chair. No, it doesn't. It's imposed upon Israel because of the 60 days they've got to get through with this lame duck, merry band of appeasers. They're out of weapons, and Netanyahu had to do it to avoid a Security Council resolution like 2016 when Obama did the jam down that declared the Western Wall occupied territory. Do you think this is a real ceasefire, or is Israel just going to let Hezbollah rearrange itself and then go back to destroying it?
Well, this is Thanksgiving, so I'll use a food metaphor, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And what this ceasefire really comes down to is the ability of Israel to enforce it. I know that in some of the diplomatic language, France is involved, which is never a good sign.
Not
America
a good
says
thing.
that it's going to be part of a committee to watch whether Hezbollah rearms and moves toward that border region between the Litani River and northern Israel. But at the end of the day, this is going to be up to Israel to make sure that Hezbollah does not get into a position like it was on October 6th. And I trust Netanyahu enough to believe that if he sees that Hezbollah is taking dangerous moves, he will act. Because that's where the Israeli public is. That's what they demand. There are many people in Israel who are dissatisfied with this ceasefire. I happen to think that when you look at Netanyahu's logic, especially how he focuses on the Iran challenge, which is behind all of this, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis, there's, I think, an argument to be made for this 60-day pause.
All right, so I listened to the commentary pod yesterday, and I recommend it to everyone. And it was a great move by Joe Biden to go to Israel, and it's been downhill since, and it's been downhill a lot faster than most people think. And if it were not for Joe Biden's muscle memory, we would have another 2016 National Security Council resolution coming out of this White House. I just think the band of appeasers around the president would do that. What do you think Trump will do differently in 60 days vis-a-vis Israel and its enemies?
Well, I think it's going to be a real difference between Biden and Trump, particularly on this issue of Iran. There's no question that the national security team that Donald Trump has put in place to take over on January 20th is going to pursue the policy of maximum pressure against the Iranian regime. That means tough sanctions. That means political warfare. That means being willing to take aggressive action, kinetic action, if Iran pushes too far in its violence against the West, its malign behavior in the region and against Israel. And I also think that should Israel decide that it needs to take action against Hezbollah, should Israel retaliate against the Houthis, which are continuing to ensnare our forces in the Red Sea, and let's not forget that Gaza is still it's a simmering front, but it's still an active front, and of course the hostages have not been retrieved. I think Trump will be much more willing to give Israel room, and part of that is sending the weapons. I mean, one of the reasons, as you alluded to, Hugh, is that for the ceasefires that Biden and the Americans have been slow walking the weapons that Israel needs to fight this war on terror. That will not happen under President Trump.
I think you're right. All right, now I want to move on to the vice president's video. She released a very unfortunate video yesterday. I don't know who's advising her. I've never known. I saw David Plouffe talking yesterday, Jen O'Malley. I guess the 30-day embargo on selling your Kamala stock has been lifted and the insiders are getting out. And no one has asked yet, how did you spend $1 billion for? And I would like David Plouffe to be asked, how much did you pocket out of this? But what did you make of this video, Matt Continetti?
Well, I thought it was bizarre. I thought that once again, America really escaped a bad fate by avoiding Kamala Harris as our chief executive. I think we would be in a bad place if she were the president of the United States. And this video was a reminder of that. I also think it was funny, Hugh, because just a few days earlier, Politico's Playbook had written a long piece touting Kamala's future in politics. Oh, she's going to run for governor of California. Oh, she's going to look at the presidency, run for the nomination in 2028. I don't know how anyone can look at this video that she released last night and then say that her political future is bright. I think this video reminded everybody of her weaknesses as a candidate that, I mean, uh, hindered her in her first run for president in 2019, where she didn't even make it to Iowa. And then, of course, hindered her campaign, where she was put into the presidential nomination without a single primary vote. So I think this is the end for Kamala Harris. But, the Democrats are in such a state. They may have no other choice but to elevate her, whether in California or nationwide.
If she had any kind of an advisor, Matt, they would have added a line in the speech. You won't have Kamala to kick around anymore. And then she would have gone and lost a run for California and then showed up in 8 years as their nominee. But they don't have any talent over there. Let's move to tariffs. I heard you guys talking about tariffs yesterday. I have a different view of tariffs. There are two kinds of tariffs. There are tariffs to raise money. That's what Hamilton liked and Lincoln liked, but that was before the income tax. The president doesn't have the authority to impose revenue generating tariffs. He does have the authority to impose national security tariffs. I am applauding the attempt to get the attention of China, Mexico, and Canada on fentanyl and migration. And I think the message was already received. If I saw little clips of the new president of Mexico and Justin Trudeau, boy, not so wonder. What do you think? Was the message received, and is that just the opening bid by Donald Trump?
Well, like all of his opening bids, he goes for the grand gesture, and then it's a matter of seeing how his negotiating partners react to it. I think it's interesting that the through line in all of the proposed tariffs, whether it's Mexico, Canada, or China, is fentanyl, is the poisoning of Americans, which is behind the deaths of despair, which itself is behind the Trump phenomenon, right? So he understands that combating the scourge of fentanyl is very important to his success as president in this upcoming second term. I think that it's interesting to watch how Sheinbaum, the new Mexican president, will respond to Trump. Trump threatened tariffs against Mexico during his first term, and Mexico, under the previous president, Lopez Obrador, responded pretty well, and there was action, and there was signs of agreement. And in fact, Trump and AMLO, which was his nickname, the former president of Mexico, they got along. Interestingly enough, they were both kind of these populist figures, big personalities. I'm not so sure Trump will have a similarly um, friendly relationship with this new Mexican president, Sheinbaum. She seems uh, much more technocratic, much more ideological, and much more, I think, hostile to personalities such as Trump. And that could be real friction. And I think bad for Mexico in the end. Because when we look at the Trump policies, he understands, I believe, that he has a few big missions. The first big mission, Hugh, is to get the economy back to where it was in 2019. The second big mission is to solve the border crisis, to begin the deportations. And the third big mission, of course, is creating peace in the world, resolving the conflict in Ukraine, and restoring deterrence and the balance of power in the Middle East. Well, that second piece, immigration, that has a lot to do with our relationship with Mexico. And it would be very bad, I think, for the Mexican president to come into this new era with a adversarial posture toward Donald Trump.
Matt, I wrote a column for Fox News yesterday about budget and reconciliation and how they can go far and fast if John Thune keeps the Senate there, Speaker Johnson keeps the House there, they negotiate the budget. The budget resolution passes, the trailer bills come. There's no reason in the real world why this can't be done by the end of February. Do you think it will be extending the tax cuts, building the wall, rebuilding defense, maybe conditioning block grants to the states for education on school choice being in place? They can do a lot. Do you think they will?
They can do a lot. They could get the reconciliation bill done relatively early, but I have to say I do have my doubts, Hugh, and mainly because this incoming Republican House majority is extremely small. There are three outstanding races with, I mean, margins within hundreds vote or less. And if they fall the way that they're running right now, you would have essentially a 220 to 215 Republican margin, one of the smallest ever. And then when you factor in Gates's resignation and, of course, Stefanik and Waltz resigning to join the administration in January, that brings the Republicans down to 217 to 215. I mean, you really don't see margins like this. And what that says to me, Hugh, is that the real challenge for Trump legislatively is the House of Representatives. Can he get the House of Representatives to agree on this reconciliation package? I think he can, but I think it will be more of a haul than people are anticipating right now.
Matt, I think he's going to send a memo to every Republican. You will have a primary challenge if you do not vote for the reconciliation budget. And the rest of the time, you can go your own way. But I need my Trump tax cuts. I need everything in that because we've got to win in 2026, and we're not going to win in 2026 unless the economy is booming and we need these authorities. Do you think even the Freedom Caucus, there are some people like Tom Massey who are really, really irresponsible, but Matt Gaetz is gone, so the most irresponsible, Nancy Mace is irresponsible. Do you think that will make them buckle, the idea that he will recruit a primary challenger if they do not pass this bill?
That will be a point of leverage. But you know, Hugh, I read your column as always, and I digested it and I marinated on it. And there are two parts in suggestions you make that I think might prove difficult for this majority. The first is the SALT, you know, rearranging the cap on state and local deductions. There are a lot of blue state congressmen from the Republican Party who want that, but of course there are many red state Republicans who don't. And so that fight, I think, is going to be pretty intense within this narrow margin. And the second is the proposal that you had to regularize the Dreamers. Big move, very, very bold move. But with this Republican conference, I don't see it getting in. My advice would be to actually narrow reconciliation to make it go through much more quickly, like you say. And that means focusing first on the taxes, focusing on including the no tax on tips, right? And the no tax on Social Security. So you have to find ways to pay for it because that's part of how we get reconciliation. And then focusing on energy and then budget cutting, which is the other.
You know, man, I want you to reconsider the Dreamers because both Biden and Obama went left when they won. Donald Trump should go to the center and expand his coalition. 10 seconds. Do you think he has any? Do you think he intuits he's got to expand the coalition?
I think you can revisit that once you secure the border and once the deportation program begins, Hugh. But the way that you treat this issue is through sequencing. And I don't think the political capital or the public trust is there to regularize the Dreamers under Trump now. Let's get the immigration under control. Then we can move to the Dreamers, perhaps in the back half of the second term.
Continenti, always pleasure to talk to Matt Continenti. Follow Continenti on X. Listen to the Commentary podcast, which is still late every single day, Matt, but I digress. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Hugh.
I'm pretty sure Mary Katharine Ham of Getting Hammered fame. Your morning show for any time in the day, and to which you ought to subscribe on YouTube, like and opine over at Getting Hammered. Mary Katharine, I don't know that they play football at your alma mater, but Ohio State is playing this weekend. Are you?
Yeah.
Are you going to be rooting for the Buckeyes as opposed to that team up north?
I don't care for Michigan. But I will be preoccupied at the Georgia Tech game this weekend, so I will be at that event.
Does that really count as a rivalry, Mary Katharine? It's Georgia Tech.
What? It's been a while, but they've pulled off a couple decent wins this year, and we should not look past this game, because that's the death knell for many a successful team, is to look past something that they thought was going to go fine and then it didn't. So we will be.
Are they playing in Athens or in Atlanta?
In Athens.
Okay, so are you going to see Sanders?
I am. I'm excited about it.
Tell Sanders. I want you to ask Sanders to break out his fluent French. All right, we were lost in Provence once with Sanders, and the waitress was giving us the French stink eye and pretending not to help us. So Sanders, out of nowhere, breaks out the fluent French and orders for the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and his wife, and I am just amazed. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but Sanders is a man of many surprises, and he's a cultured guy, and I bet his French accent is just magnificent combined with his Georgia accent.
Well, if he could simply say, "Go Buckeyes, beat that team up north," I would like it. All right, let's do some victory dancing here. Jay Bhattacharya. I have already played a couple of clips from my interview with him last year. I want you to hold forth on why this makes you happy.
Oh, this is my favorite pick of the transition yet, because it is so poetic that Francis Collins, the former head of the NIH, talked a bunch of junk about Dr. J, tried to sort of smear him as a member of the Barrington group, as a fringe epidemiologist at one point, because the entire government's idea was to just shove all this down everyone's throats, not have a conversation about it, not engage with anyone who had different ideas about whether you should shut down an entire greatest economy in the history of man. And Dr. J. Bhattacharya had different ideas about that. And as a result, he had to be treated badly. And so after he's treated badly, he's unfailingly kind, mild-mannered, smart, gives other people a chance to weigh in. And he's like, has to suffer slings and arrows at Stanford. And then what happens? But this guy who was right about COVID when so many other people were wrong, who stood up when it was tough to do, gets the very job that Francis Collins had and used to go after him. And I am so excited. It's just, I love to see good stuff rewarded, and this guy is a good guy who is smart. And by the way, one of the reasons he saw through all of this, not only is he an epidemiologist, he's an economist. So it occurred to him there might be other harms happening here.
Yeah, downstream effects and negative externalities which were not being captured. I got to tell you, I was very GOP-y during this whole thing. Get the vaccine, social distancing, wear your mask. Francis Collins was on 4 times, Anthony Fauci 3 or 4 times. They lied to me, Mary Katharine. They just lied to me. And so I've always, when somebody lies to me straight up, I'm done with them. Jay Bhattacharya, good on that. Now, let me ask you about the problem. There are a couple of problems, Mary Katharine. I listened to Getting Hammered. Number one, you have Christmas bedding on the kids' beds already. This is a violation of every Christmas rule. Do you want to plead guilty and ask for leniency of the court, or are you going to deny that it's in fact true?
I mean, that's all I can do because as you can see, I think over my shoulder, there's a Christmas tree. So I'm busting.
Oh gosh. Oh, you broke another rule. Oh,
So
third,
let me,
don't go to
here's
3 strikes, you'll be out.
here's how I'll argue for mercy. It is this. I have 4 kids. We're out of town until basically December 1st because Thanksgiving is so late. And I got to start early and gradually if I'm going to get everything done before, I don't know, like December 20th. So here we are, gradually working so that mom doesn't go crazy, so that everybody still ends up with a Christmas.
All right. You can get some mercy from the court if you lend me Steve. I had to lift a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old asleep out of car seats last night. You've been to my house. It's up and down, 4 flights. And you know that the weight of a 5-year-old increases by about 150% if they're dead asleep. You are aware of that physics, right? That's a
I
law of
am
physics.
very aware of that, and Steve is available. He is in fact just like definitely built for lifting things.
I have one more indictment that has been returned,
Okay.
and not by Juan Merchan. This is actually an admission against interest that you made that may not be protected because it was on a podcast. I think that's public
Okay.
domain. You watched 11 seasons of Dallas?
Yes, I did. See, this is the difference. I had 0 children then, so I could really indulge in some silliness. And so, yes, 11 seasons of Dallas with my best friend when we were roommates. It was a fantastic journey. Dallas was a fantastic show, and I am truly not ashamed of it. I enjoyed it very much.
Oh, Mary Catherine, I'm a young parent when Dallas is on the air, and young parents will watch anything if the kids are asleep. And I couldn't watch Dallas. Is there any counterpart to Dallas in the modern media culture? Not
You know what
Games
they
of Thrones.
No, I mean there's prestige TV, so you don't have to have Dallas anymore. But I mean, I think Bravo is basically Dallas. Like the Real Housewives is Dallas, except it's not exactly scripted. But they also tried to reboot Dallas because the things from the 80s and 90s are what people want, but they just keep trying to reboot, and it doesn't actually work as well as the original.
All right. So my last question, Mary Catherine, in terms of watching television with 4 children, do you ever finish any series? Because my daughter doesn't, because their interruptions are continual, and you've got soccer games and you've got PTA meetings. By the way, now let me divert. How are you as a PTA mom when you go in for the parent-teacher conference? Are you, oh, that's great, good, and get out of there, or are you diving into the specifics?
Oh, if I'm there, I am out as soon as possible. The thing is about me with the 4 children and the job and everything, you can't pile on too many more responsibilities or those balls will get dropped. And so I am wary of how much I am offering to do. For instance, there was a preschool Thanksgiving feast, which is just another thing on my list of to do this week. But you know what I did? I signed up for fruit because you know why? We always got fruit in the house. So I knew that when it came down to it and I was last minute freaking out, I could just cut the fruit and take it to the preschool. So that's my level
No,
of
I got
involvement.
one last question. My daughter got a call from the preschool where T-Rex Teddy goes. He's 2 years old. He
Yeah.
has a 9-year-old brother. So they wrestle. So the problem is the 2-year-old is tackling everyone at the preschool.
Yeah.
And my daughter, has that occurred yet in the Ham Steve household?
It hasn't, but with our older kids being young ladies, it's probably just going to be like inappropriate Taylor Swift lyrics.
Oh, okay. It's a terrible thing to have too many years between the oldest and the youngest because the youngest pick up what the oldest has done. Mary Catherine, you
sure.
have a wonderful Thanksgiving. My best to Steve and the kids, and I look forward to talking to you when I'm back from filling in for Dennis, floating around the Caribbean. My Thanksgiving is flying to Fort Lauderdale to go to the Dennis cruise, but that is not a
All right.
hardship, and I am happy to do it. So, Mary Catherine, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and go
Have
getting
fun.
hammered.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. On this Thanksgiving Eve, I hope you are prepared and on your way to grandmother's house. Last night, I went to News Nation and spoke with Leland Bitterdus, a friend of mine. We were diving deep into tariffs and other things. Let's listen to that exchange with Leland on News Nation last night.
We start tonight with radio talk show host, friend of the show, Hugh Hewitt. Hugh, it is good to see you. I want to talk to you about the tariffs here. To be fair, Trump says he's going to raise tariffs 25%. Is it not the media's responsibility to report on what a 25% tariff on everything coming in from China and Canada would mean?
Sure it is, Leland, and good evening. Thank you for having me as always. It's important for people to understand it might raise, for example, the cost of oil imported from Canada. We get a lot of oil from Canada, and that will go up, and it would probably have an impact if that were to go into place in the Rocky Mountain. But these are national security tariffs. They are being imposed on Mexico, Canada, and China because it is from Mexico and Canada that we have migration problems, and it is from China, Mexico, and Canada that we have a fentanyl problem. What is the price of a life? And we lose about 100,000 people to overdoses every year. About 70% of them are fentanyl related. And so what Donald Trump is saying to China, Mexico, and Canada is get control of the fentanyl, get control of the migration, and this won't have to happen. And, of course, we will pay more for some products, and, of course, Mexico will retaliate. But this is one arena. This is not Smoot-Hawley. We're not going to bring about World War II or bring about a Great Depression because 3 countries get hit with some tariffs. What they are doing is what you just said, negotiating from a position of strength. The American economy is the greatest in the world by a lot, and I think Donald Trump, when he brings his big stick to this conversation, it's not going to bring about a depression. The market shrugged it off today. It's an opening bid by the president-elect to get the attention of 3 great offenders, and I think it was well done.
Well, he certainly got the attention of Justin Trudeau. I think he used to refer to him as Justin of Canada. Earlier, here he is talking to CBC.
I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our 2 countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do.
So thank you, Hugh, for sitting through the long monologue and open. But is there some similarities to the Biden warnings all the time, don't escalate, this is escalatory, on and on and on, and the Israelis just going out and doing their thing, and Donald Trump saying, I'm going to raise tariffs, and everybody going, oh, my God, everything's going to be so more expensive, and with, what, less than 24 hours, Trudeau folds?
Well, I do think Trudeau is a notoriously erratic character. They had a pogrom in Montreal over the weekend, and he is a remarkably weak politician who is afraid to call an election because he'll get wiped out by Pierre Poilievre. And so I'm not really worried about what Canada thinks. And I think we want to distinguish the Canadians, who are wonderful people, from the Canadian government, which is a complete laughingstock, actually. They sanctioned Israel, and Israel didn't actually buy many weapons from them, but they stopped weapon shipment. Trudeau is kind of a joke. And if he had a long talk with Donald Trump, I guarantee you Donald Trump did most of the talking. And it won't be, he's not long for that job in any event. So we're not worried about that. We are worried. It's only about 15,000 people have crossed the northern border over the last 16 months or so. That's what I read up on today, about 15,000 people. Fentanyl is real, also coming from Canada. So it's important to bring Canada into this conversation to get them straightened out on the northern border. But the real problem is China and Mexico. And the number of migrants coming through Mexico is something they can and have controlled in the past. The amount of fentanyl precursors coming from China is something that they have limited or agreed to limit in the past, and they haven't followed through. Now, to the comparison with Israel, I loved your monologue, Leland. There's only one thing I want to disagree with. Joe Biden today at the White House said this brings to a close the war with Hezbollah. It does not bring to a close the war with Hezbollah. A ceasefire is, by definition, not a treaty, not a surrender. It is a ceasefire. And Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, was very explicit today. If Hezbollah does anything, if it burps, he's back in. Yep. 60 days takes us into the Trump administration. And after 60 days, the weapon shipments will begin again that have been slow-walked or stalled in some portions by Team Biden. We cannot wait to get a real foreign policy back as opposed to team appeasement, which is in the White House right now.
You call him team appeasement. We have the graphic ready. Antony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, Jake Sullivan, and Joe Biden leading the charge. It was interesting today when he held this press conference, when Joe Biden did, because he's been working for 14 months to get a ceasefire in Gaza. Hasn't happened. I think he hopes that people over Thanksgiving dinner conflate Hamas and Hezbollah, and somehow he gets credit for said ceasefire. But this is what President Biden said again today to the Israelis who have defied him over and over and over again. Take a listen.
Israel has been bold on the battlefield. Iran and its proxies have paid a very heavy price. Now Israel must be bold in turning tactical gains against Iran and its proxies into a coherent strategy.
It's just mind-boggling to me that after having gotten this wrong for so long, he feels that he has the position, I guess, if you're president of the United States, you feel like you do, to tell the Israelis, number one, to do anything, but number two, basically be bold is offer more concessions to Iran.
There is one stick that Joe Biden has, and I listened to the commentary podcast today, Leland, and they were talking about it. People have to remember in 2016 when Barack Obama was a lame duck, on December 22nd or 23rd, the UN passed a Security Council resolution basically saying that all of Jerusalem was occupied territory, even the Western Wall, and that all Jewish settlements in Jerusalem, even in the Jewish quarter, were against international law. And we did not veto that. So it is the belief of those on the commentary pod, and I believe that they are accurate about this, that Israel was threatened into the ceasefire by virtue of a fear of a replay of the Obama endgame being the Biden endgame, a Security Council resolution some way injuring Israel. And what I heard Netanyahu say today is that 60 days, if they blink, we're going back in. I also want to say it might just be that you've done a lot of war reporting, Leland. It seems to me the Israelis are either completely aware of everything Hezbollah is doing, or they've got a spy in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps inside of Khamenei's inner circle. They're just going to wait for Hezbollah to redeploy its tattered remnants somewhere else. And after 60 days, if they have to, they'll do another pager, another beeper, another walkie-talkie, another Hassan Nasrallah wipeout. They are very capable of destroying the remnants of Hezbollah if they want to in 60 days.
I think all of what you said is true, and I would add to that that the Iranians have totally changed their tune, too, now that Donald Trump has won, right? Because they promised all of this retribution after Israel hit their nuclear site, which Joe Biden said don't do. Israel did anyway. And then Donald Trump gets elected, and we haven't heard boo out of the Iranians. And if anything, the Iranians have sold Hezbollah down the river because they can't get arms shipments into them and have said basically you're on your own, and said the same thing to Hamas, which sort of proves the point, right? That if Joe Biden had kept up the maximum pressure campaign of Donald Trump on Iran, Iran wouldn't have done any of this stuff. We wouldn't have had October 7th. We wouldn't have had all the attacks on U.S. troops.
Maximum pressure is coming back, Leland. Brian Hook is the leader of the Trump transition at the Department of State, where Marco Rubio is. Ambassador Hook led the Iranian effort of maximum pressure during Trump 1.0. He'll be back in Trump 2.0. The same policies will be back. Iranian oil will be sanctioned. And now all their S-300s are destroyed. Their anti-aircraft, as you showed the pictures. Israel can go anywhere. We can go anywhere in Iranian airspace. And I believe Israel will if, in fact, they are hit a third time. So you mentioned paper tiger. I don't think Iran is a paper tiger because I think they are fanatics and they are theocrats and they want a nuclear weapon. But they are significantly more vulnerable than they were 14 months ago. So when we go back to 14 months ago, I asked Aviv Redig-Gur yesterday, a Times of Israel analyst, and I think maybe one of the best in the Middle East, along with Dr. Oren, whether or not Israelis were better off 14 months after the massacre and whether worldwide Jewry was. And Haviv's answer was, Israelis feel much more secure. Deterrence has been restored. But worldwide Jewry is in a much more perilous place because of the last 14 months. And that is largely because America did not stand up and stay strong after a good start by President Biden when he went to Israel. It's been backpedaling since. And that was, Leland does long segments. I enjoy being on News Nation with Leland because he's a newsman like Bret Baier. Yeah, he's a real newsman. It's a fair show like Bret Baier's Special Report is a fair show. It is not polemic. It's questions and answers, and I like doing that because then you get a long conversation. If you missed yesterday's commentary podcast, which spent an hour on the ceasefire deal, go and listen to it with Jay Pod and Matt Continetti and Christine Rosen. Seth Mandela is on vacation, but Abe Greenwald got to say it's worse than that. which is his trademark line, and it is worse than that. The Biden administration has been a disaster for Israel, but they're gone soon. They're gone soon. Netanyahu's going to wait him out. Netanyahu waits out everybody. He is somewhat indestructible. We're from Ohio, and by we, I mean me and Bernie Moreno. Senator-elect Bernie Moreno joins me. Good morning, Senator Moreno. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And what about that Indiana game? Man, did we crush them?
I know, and they were supposed to be good. I still think they make the 12, though, Senator-elect Moreno.
I hope so.
I want 4 Big Ten teams in there. Senator, I want to look back at the election. You won handily. I remember all year long people saying, oh, he's too extreme, he's not real, he's a bad candidate. Did anyone come up to you and say, sorry, we got this completely wrong?
No, no. I have a disproportionately large number of people who supported me who I didn't realize had supported me. But the worst part, Hugh, is that Sherrod Brown's never called me to concede.
What?
And never called to concede, and closed down all of his offices around the state and in D.C. So we're going to have to pick up a slack of an enormous amount of constituent services that are going unattended.
I know you're going to be able to do that, Bernie Moreno. Tell me a little bit about your advice to Governor DeWine on replacing J.D. Vance so that you're going to be the senior senator from Ohio. If J.D. resigns on the day before the inauguration, you're sworn in on January the 3rd, you get to be the senior senator from Ohio. Who do you want to be the junior senator from Ohio?
Well, somebody who is willing to work hard, somebody who can raise money, somebody who's absolutely committed to the America First agenda, and somebody who's willing to just put it all on the field. Because the way I won, he was very simple: is good old-fashioned grit, determination, hard work, and that's what voters expect. Because if you work hard as a candidate, they know that you'll work hard as a senator. So we need somebody who's willing to do that.
Now, you came in with Tim Sheehy and Dave McClure. It's a great class, right? There are a lot of new faces that have come in, and of course, Governor Justice from West Virginia. When you went to the orientation, did you learn anything, or was it kind of, really? It moves that slowly?
No, I learned a ton, actually. And don't forget Jim Banks, by the way, great.
Oh, Jim Banks, a good friend. Yeah, Jim Banks.
Yep. So we know there's a lot of important things that were covered in orientation. The Senate has a great staff, by the way. Extremely organized, extremely meticulous. They had a whole 200-page book that we had to read beforehand that answered 90% of the questions that I had. But learning and understanding how the machine works is extremely important. And so now we're in the phase of hiring a staff. We're going to have the greatest staff in the history of the United States Senate. We got past the leadership vote, which was fantastic. And now it's about confirming President Trump's nominees. That's job one for the 119th Congress.
Now, Senator-elect Moreno, the key thing is, which committees do you end up on? I don't know if they've been assigned yet. I don't know if you put in a prom bid card. I don't know how it works. What's going on there?
So you send in a request to the majority leader and to the committee on committees. And so they look at, committee membership. I put on there why I thought I should be on certain committees based on my background and experience, because I want to add value. I want to make certain if I'm on a committee that I'm adding value to the American people. And obviously the most important thing to me, Hugh, is just to do a good job. And I think I can do a good job on commerce, on banking, on homeland, on budget. And those are where I think I can add the most value.
Now, I know that Doug Burgum was out on the campaign trail, the incoming Secretary of the Interior and chair of the National Energy Council. Ohio's got a lot of energy, a lot of natural gas, a lot of fracking going on there. Do you want to be with oversight on the development of Ohio's energy resources?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike Lee is going to be the chairman of that committee. He's going to do a great job. Look, at the end of the day, we need to be an energy superpower because fossil fuels are the underlying material in almost everything we use. It's not just electricity. This is everything that we use in our day-to-day lives. And we have 1,000 years of natural gas in this country. We have to make certain that we're tapping into that, tapping that wealth, getting it out of the ground, and making this country an energy superpower. That's what's going to do two things: lower our deficit and increase our GDP, which is the only path forward to have a budget that's sustainable in this nation.
Did you talk about with Senator Thune, the incoming majority leader, the process for getting the budget and reconciliation done, because it's the key to unlocking everything, and it's got to be done first. The budget resolution's got to be done first. Usually the Senate settles in and the House settles in, and they dicker around when their parties are controlling the same. They're not going to have but 2 or 3 seat margin in the House. Do you think you can get it done in timely fashion and the trailing bills, which matter so much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the huge advantages of having Senator Thune as a majority leader, aside from the fact that he's a really great human being and a great communicator and a great representative of the Senate, is that he worked in the House. So he knows how the House works. He's building a great relationship with the Speaker. He understands the machine really well, as I said earlier. So I think we're going to get a lot of things done. Look, the Democrats opened the door. They showed us what was possible with reconciliation, and we'll take that to the next level to get the agenda of President Trump done.
Now, in terms of the president, have you talked with him since the election?
No, I talked to JD quite a bit. You know, President Trump, I leave him alone. He's extraordinarily busy. I know that he's very happy for my victory. I'm ecstatic about his victory. And unless I need something urgent, he's got a lot of things to do. So JD and I talk quite a bit. Obviously, we're good friends, and we're all very excited to get to work on January 3rd.
You know, the first time I met you and Senator Vance was on a debate stage, and soon to be Vice President Vance and you were mixing it up pretty good. I mean, politely, gentlemen, but I mean, you were sparking. How did the friendship develop after you began running against each other?
Well, we knew each other before then. I always point out to JD that he launched his campaign after I did. But the reality is, look, we had a spirited campaign. We were never disrespectful to each other. JD and I are very ideologically aligned. You know, he was an outsider to this world as I was. He understands, Hugh, the necessity to rebuild our working class, to rebuild the middle class in this country. Is job one. To reindustrialize is not only important economically, it's important from a national security perspective. I'm going to be hyper-focused on the auto industry. If you look at what we've done there, we've shipped about 3 million units of production to Canada and Mexico. That 3 million units of production has devastated communities that you care about: Warren, Ohio, Youngstown, Canton, Akron, Lorain, Toledo, Dayton. Those communities were gutted when we made that decision. So we need to bring an American automobile manufacturing renaissance back to this country, and JD and I are 100% aligned on that.
Lordstown and Packard Electric, it would be good to have the lines running again. Let me close this way, Senator-elect Moreno. Where are you going to live? Are you going to live in Maryland, D.C., or where you should live, which is Virginia?
No, I have my daughter lived in D.C., so I'd gotten her a condo a couple of years ago. It's in Shaw, so I'll stay there. It's 10 minutes from the Senate office building, so I'll stay in my condo, but I'm going to come back to Ohio, obviously, on weekends and at least 1 week a month, and travel the entire state. So my travel journey of the state's not over. I want to meet people and constituents, understand what they care about, so that will inform me for what I do in D.C.
Well, congratulations and a happy Thanksgiving. When you came in early, I knew it was going to be a good night, and I am so happy that Ohio's got a great new senator in Bernie Moreno. Thank you, Senator-elect Moreno, for joining me. Keep coming back. 3 or 6 years ahead.
Thank you. You too, and have a great Thanksgiving.
I will. Now, I want to tell everyone about our friends at Prison Fellowship, because they're doing what they do every year. They are doing Angel Tree. And I am a big believer, as is the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, in Angel Tree. We used to be able to do it on the porch of our church, but our church is no longer there. And so now we do it just with a direct contribution to Angel Tree. $30 takes care of one child at Christmas. Their mom or their dad might be in prison, but they still deserve Christmas. If you have $300, you take care of 10 children. $3,000, Steelers fans, that's 100 kids. Whatever you can afford. Now, Gallagher, of course, has already raised $3,000. And so one day we started asking for Angel Tree, and Gallagher calls me up last night and says, I'm killing you. And that's okay. I do not care if Mike beats me. I mean, he's got some advantages, and that's okay. I don't mind an uneven playing field. But change a child's Christmas life with Angel Tree. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com, and here's what your $30 does. Gets the child a present of their choice. Gets a note from mom or dad, or both, in prison, that says to them, I love you, I'm thinking of you, here's a present from your dad or your mom or both parents. They get a Bible, a children's Bible, and they get connected to Angel Tree. Because to break the cycle of imprisonment, you've got to get other adults into the lives of children when their parents are doing their time for their crime. And that's what Angel Tree does. They redeem the life inside the prison. I'm going to talk with Terry Pluto about this next hour. Dean of Ohio sports writer, also big on prison ministry. But I think, you might not be cut out for visiting prisons. It's not what is my calling either, although we are enjoined to visit the prison and to ransom the captive. Terry does it. And I want you to know that it's a wonderful thing. But you can do your prison ministry with a contribution today. Now, a lot of you shop on Black Friday. That's fine. Before you shop for one present for your family or yourself, give one present to a child who otherwise isn't going to get a basketball, isn't going to get a football, isn't going to get a Barbie, isn't going to get anything because mom or dad doesn't have any money because the other parent or both parents are behind bars. So please be as generous as you can. And give a listen, if you will, to Prison Fellowship Angel Tree volunteer Michelle talking about your generosity and what it'll do for a child.
Angel Tree is about the family and helping to grow God's kingdom. We're out there being the hands and feet of Jesus, shining a light into the darkest parts of our neighborhoods, of our communities, by bringing the light of Jesus Christ into their homes. And that's what makes the difference. You're actually connecting with a family that's in need of hope. And there's no hope like Christ.
Now, you can text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 7177767. But I just think go to the banner at hughhewitt.com. See this book, Dawn's Early Light? I am inhaling it. Kevin Roberts is the author. The Heritage Foundation is a sponsor of this show, but I would have read this book anyway. Kevin Roberts is a very smart guy, and I did not know his backstory, and now I do. It's moving and it's inspirational and explains to you why he is such a proponent of the family. And if you read Dawn's Early Light, you'll also get a reality check on what to expect and what not to expect from the Trump 4 years. Dawn's Early Light is a must-read. Go over to Amazon, give it to all your family and friends, especially those who don't agree with you politically, because it's a persuasive book. Dawn's Early Light. Dawn's Early Light. Can I say it 7 times? Dawn's Early Light, Dawn's Early Light. Remember Dawn's Early Light. Go to Amazon. Kevin Roberts is the author. You will love this book for Christmas. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show on Thanksgiving Eve. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. This poem was given me as an assignment last week by producer Dwayne, who was concerned about potential political rancor at the Thanksgiving dinner table. This is a week for feasting. This is a week for thanks. Of all the weeks throughout the year, the top's where this one ranks. With great anticipation, we know before it ends, we'll fill the hours with food and talk with family and friends. We'll share the ways we're grateful for how the good things find us and amplify our gratitude for bad things left behind us. And so, a word of warning, dear sisters and dear brothers. Some may recollect this year more joyfully than others. Try to use diplomacy whenever you are able. You may wear your MAGA hat, but please not at the table. And just the way you'd overlook some menu imperfections, don't start conversations over cabinet selections. If they bring up the subject and ask the way you vote, pass the mashed potatoes, and pity's sake, don't gloat. Reach out the hand of friendship and reconciliation. Welcome them to join in prayers to help and heal the nation. But if your pleasant overtures are angrily rebuffed, offer them some dressing and tell them to get stuffed. That's Can You Say That on the Radio by Tarzana Joe.
That was a little bit of a twist there at the end, Joe, but I like it. Will that be posted in time for Thanksgiving at tarzanajoe.com?
Absolutely. With former year prayers that are a little more perhaps respectful and prayerful.
Well, I think that they ought to read your poem before Grace. I'd like to read a little poem by Tarzana Joe, and then we're going to say Grace, and then we're not going to bring up red and blue. We're not going to talk about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. We're just going to focus on Ohio State beating Michigan on Sunday. I'm on Saturday. Goodness. Saturday. Tarzana Joe, happy Thanksgiving to you. I'm thankful for your efforts year-round. If you need a poem, write to him at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com, or go to his website, tarzanajoe.com, and say, I need a poem. There's a button. You can't miss it, unless you're a Steelers fan. But even you might be able to find it. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
I promise to be a good, I'm sorry, Steelers fan, I promise, but you delivered Pennsylvania, so I'm going to be nice to you. I am thankful for friends like Jan Genera. Jan is the author of this book, Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. You can go to jansbooks.com, Jans, Jans books.com. It's a perfect stocking stuffer bestseller on 20 different lists. He's got a sequel coming out because it did so well. And he's not paying me to say that. I just happened to see it here, and I thought I would put that up before I tell you about the Wild Adventure Young Guns, TWA.us. The Young Guns group is a fly fishing trip for men 21 to 30, led by an older guy, too. And they've got the professional guides, and it's done at Rainbow Lake and the Smiling Moose Lodge, and it changes lives, and it really connects younger men, 21 to 30, with a bunch of friends, and they talk about where they are in life, what they expect from life, maybe the bumps along the road. They sometimes get veterans, sometimes they don't. With honored guest David Bonson of the Bonson Group joining me from the West Coast. Good morning, David. Happy Thanksgiving in advance to you. I hope you have the turkey already basting somewhere. Up, you're muted, David. We didn't get whatever your wonderfully witty opening remark was because we had a mute button either on our team or on your team. So we got to go back and figure that out, and then I'll bring him back. In the meantime, I want to bring everyone up to speed with what Jay Bhattacharya tweeted last night, which is, I am honored and humbled by President Donald Trump's nomination of me to be the next NIH director. We will reform America's scientific institutions so that they are worthy of trust again and will deploy the fruits of excellent science to make America great again. 3-year letterman, a must-follow account, responded, will you invite me to the White House as an honored guest? To which Dr. B responded, none of us are fit to enter into the house of our greatest president, Ben Franklin, 3-year letterman. But if you were ever in the neighborhood, it would be fun to visit a local Beef O'Brady together. And that just wins, as 3-year letterman pointed, that guarantees 100-0 confirmation. Do we have David Bonson back now? We can't figure it out. Technology. David goes into his little home studio and sits there. Let me take the opportunity to ask you to please contribute to Angel Tree. Angel Tree is the Ministry of Prison Fellowship, which takes care of the young children of prisoners. Sometimes not so young. They can be teenagers. They might want makeup. I don't know if it's allowed. But basketballs, footballs, Barbies, whatever the child wants, they make a list. And mom or dad write a note, depending on what the gift is, and they say, dear son or daughter, I want you to love this Barbie, this football. I am thinking about you on this Christmas morning, and I will see you soon. And when we get back together, we will be great. The banner is at hughhewitt.com. David Bonson, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Well, happy Thanksgiving. I'm hearing you. Hopefully you're hearing me.
I am indeed. David, I want to begin by talking to you about tariffs. I doubt you're a big tariff fan, but there are two kinds of tariffs. There's Smoot-Hawley and the bad tariffs when we used to use them to raise money. And then there are strategic tariffs when you hit people over the head like Mexico, Canada, and China about fentanyl and migration. What did you make of yesterday's announcement by the president-elect?
I would disagree with you that there's only two categories, but I would agree with you that what was said yesterday about Mexico and Canada, not China, fit into a different category where the serious intent is to not impose any tariffs, to use it as a blunt instrument to get their cooperation at the border. In other words, it is not a protectionist economic agenda. It is a national security agenda. So if it works, everyone's going to celebrate it. And I strongly suspect it will to some degree. But I don't think that tariffs that are merely used as a threat are always an effective way to do so when the agenda is economic, because the victim is never just the person you're going after. You inevitably have to hurt American business as well.
Now, the 10% on China is also aimed at fentanyl. And the president-elect said so specifically They have promised repeatedly to stop the flow. Nothing happens in China that the CCP doesn't know about. They could stop fentanyl tomorrow. So I'm in favor of that national security tariff as well. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that that one is a bit more nuanced because it is existing in tandem with other tariff threats and conversation that have other agendas. And so it's hard to differentiate all of the different tariffs at different purposes. We talk about national security, we talk about fentanyl, but he also talks about kind of evening out the trade level. And I do not agree, and nor would anyone else if they ever experienced it, that a trade surplus with China would be a positive for our country.
Well, I agree with that. And I also agree that generally speaking, Smoot-Hawley worldwide tariffs are a bad idea, but this is not that. And I spent some time on with News Nation last night explaining to people, Lincoln was in favor of tariffs, Hamilton was in favor of tariffs, he used tariffs to protect domestic industries. They don't work that way anymore. They're only useful as a tool of national security. Are we in basic agreement?
Yeah, other than I just think, and I know you'll agree, but it's important we not talk about the way that they advocated tariffs as a revenue generator without mentioning that they did not have an income tax. So when we talk about a tariff today as a way of generating revenue and talk about the very clear Hamiltonian support of it, that today it would not be either or. It would be both and so there is a bit of difference there. But certainly, we're in agreement. Using tariffs to protect certain industries, I think, is cronyist and a bad idea. President Trump is going to use them for his strategic purposes, and I'm giving him a chance here. Just along the way, when I talk to my other friends, I'm not going to pretend I now support new taxes.
Now, David Bonson is my non-paid financial advisor. In other words, I don't ask David. I don't pay David to manage my money, but I like him to second guess what I did. You know, I only own 3 stocks until last week. I own Amazon, Microsoft, and Palantir, and the rest goes into mutual funds because I'm not smart like you, David. But I sold Palantir last week. I just said, this is nuts. What do you think of that?
Well, I think you might potentially have a couple others that are nuts too there, but valuation is a very difficult timing mechanism. Stocks can get overvalued and stay overvalued for a very long time. Keynes had a line about things being crazier longer than you can be solvent and so forth. But look, I think that there are a lot of things, mostly on the large cap growth side, that are stretched in valuation. But profit growth is very good in our country right now. And so with a decent economic backdrop and good profit growth, valuations may stay stretched. But people do need to know that these NVIDIAs, Microsofts, Amazon's in this bucket too. It won't end up ending well. Of that, I'm certain. But I wouldn't try to time it, Hugh.
Let me ask you something, David. There's a Christmas rally traditionally. Is that a myth for dummies like me, or is it a reality for investor and managers like you?
Oh, you're not a dummy, but it is definitely a myth. Markets are up about 59% of the time in December. Markets are up about 59% of most months. So there's no particular reality around a Christmas rally. And having done this professionally 25 years, my wife can attest that we've had many Christmas holidays ruined by market volatility. So it can cut both ways. It's tougher to get a Christmas rally, by the way, when you've had the kind of Q4 and Q3 we've already had. In other words, you could argue Christmas came in September this year.
Yeah. So let me now go macro. The president's going to get his tax cuts extended and revised. I personally want to see the SALT deduction doubled, because not for economic reasons, but because of the equity that people put into living where they chose to live on the assumption of a 30-year mortgage being deductible. I thought we broke faith with the American people when we changed that. What do you think about the tax extension? Will it be good for the country? And do you want the SALT to be changed?
Okay, well, hold on, Hugh. The SALT deduction has nothing to do with the mortgage deduction. The mortgage deduction is in place apart from the state and local tax deduction, and moving it from a 10K cap where it is now for SALT to 20K isn't going to impact anybody. The higher rates, the lower rates and better AMT more than offset that impact. The only people affected by SALT were very candidly people like me, very high earners in blue states. And it was brutal.
Well, yes.
Yeah, philosophically, I fully agree with it. I do not believe that Texans and South Dakotans should be subsidizing New York and California. The mortgage interest deduction is a different story because it's still $1 million for anybody who had $1 million mortgage before. For new homeowners since 2018, it went to 750K. You could deduct the mortgage of 750, but nobody had something taken from them. It was only for a new mortgage going forward, and that mortgage deduction is separate from SALT. It's
See,
funny,
this shows my ignorance. I thought state and local taxes included property taxes, and property taxes on homes got capped.
Right. No. You're right about that. But you had said the mortgage deduction.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm talking about property taxes. Property taxes are destroying people in New York. They're destroying people in Connecticut. They're destroying people in California, though it's less there, new home people. We should not break faith with people who bought a 30-year fixed mortgage and have their property taxes going up year after year. It just strikes me as being a double cross on the Americans. You got 1 minute to respond to that, David.
Well, though, Hugh, the problem, where I disagree with you is that what you're suggesting is therefore people in South Dakota should pay for it, right? That all we're talking about is relieving people's federal income taxes for what their state does. People have mobility, and I don't think it's a double cross when nobody was promised that their federal taxes would go down for their bad state policy. There's an easy way to do it. Pass what you and I did in California with Prop 13, pass that in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. You change the whole situation.
The Bonson Group is the best place to park your money if you need someone to manage it, because David really knows what he's doing. And especially if you're an endowment, because you're going to get whacked. But David, we have a fundamental disagreement. I don't think we've ever talked about this before. When 25 years ago, somebody moved to California or New York, or somebody moved to Connecticut, or somebody moved to a high tax state or a high property tax state, they did so knowing and making a budget that they could deduct those property taxes from their federal income tax. And they built a life, right? They can't. They're not like you and me. They can't move around. We're 1%ers. They can't move around. And then we took it away from them. And I argued with Kevin Brady and Kevin McCarthy. It is a surefire political disaster, as it's proven to be. And it's wrong because we made a promise in the tax code. Why do you think I'm wrong about that?
Hugh, by that logic, you would be suggesting that the Congress can never change the tax code. State tax rates go up. I moved to California. The top rate was 8%. I set my family there. I set my budget. And then now my tax rate is 14.1%. So I don't think marginal tax rate should go higher, but I certainly believe that the states have a right to change it. In the case with the feds, they changed it to solve for an inequity, not to change one. The only people whose net tax impact went up were very high earners in about 6 blue states. And the people who benefited are the folks in other red states that are better managed. What is happening with the SALT deduction was that California, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Michigan, Illinois were being subsidized by states that weren't putting punitive levels of taxation. With California, as you point out, it isn't so much the property tax side because of Prop 13, it's the egregiously high state income tax. And so by deducting it off my federal return, I mean, Hugh, you can imagine how much I pay in state income taxes.
Well, why did I leave? I left because of that. Yep. 14% is ridiculous.
Right. But on the property tax side, there's no middle class family, none, that had their net federal tax impact go up because of this. Brady and Ryan were very, very good at making sure, as they stress tested it, the only impact was in the very top bracket. And it wasn't even people at 400, 600,000 of income. It was even north of that because remember, the marginal rates came down, as did AMT relief. I still understand.
David, I sat with people in New York last year. I'm rushing a little bit because we're going to run out of time. Maybe I'll keep you into the next segment. I sat with people last year in New York who have to sell their Chautauqua homes because of property taxes in New York. And it's a family tradition. 5 generations they've been living in the Chautauqua home that gets passed on because New York's property taxes are crazy. But when we broke faith with those people, we should have done it over 20 years, not in 1 year. That was my argument, not to end it, but to do it over 20 years. Why not do over 20 what you did in 1?
Hugh, you're exactly right about the problem, but you're switching to a different solution. The problem, what was done to them, was the egregious move higher in their property tax. Nobody's having to
Yes.
move because they lost federal deductibility. They're moving because their property taxes went from a low level to a ridiculously high level. And the only solution you're proposing is to make South Dakota pay for it. That's my point. They were done wrong, but they were not done wrong by the federal act. They were done wrong by their own state.
Well, you know, my contract lawyer in me says if you've relied upon a promise from the federal government, you have a right to have that promise honored. You're right about the subsidy. I always admit it was a subsidy.
Every year. It's like
Yeah,
saying if
but
you buy a stock capital gain rate, when I bought a stock and the capital gain rate used to be 37% and now it's 15, the tax code changed and it got better for me, right?
you brought up capital gains. It can go up and down every year. Everyone knows capital gains change, and you can get in and out of a stock in a hurry depending on whether or not you're going to make it. Houses are different. When Americans buy a house and start to raise a family, they get network connection, they put down roots. And when the SALT deduction is capped, they are at disadvantage because the federal government broke. I don't know how long the SALT deduction was in place, but it was at least 30 years, wasn't it?
Well, it was different, and also, Hugh, you by that logic, you would have to say that state taxes can't go up. They moved
No,
with an understanding.
no.
They moved with an understanding of state taxes, right?
They did, but they moved to a house. I move, you move, people move all the time. When you buy a house, you start a life. And when you start a life, your reliance damages. First day, first year, law school, Bev Pooley, reliance damages are everything. If you rely on a contract, in this case, a social contract, if someone breaks it, they owe you money. I think the federal government had a reliance damages
Right,
debt to
you
all
are
of
in
us.
theory, but why I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. If somebody makes a couple $100,000 a year and has an $800,000 house, the property taxes are $8,000, and now over time they've gone up to $20,000. They've gone up 2.5 times, and they lose that deductibility. It's a $6,000 impact. Their state taxes and the portion, I'm saying 6,000 of the deductibility. The state taxes and the property taxes that went up so much is exponentially higher. So that's why I don't understand why we focus on the federal impact versus what the states are doing. The very easy solution is to have a social contract where people buy a house, make roots, have an understanding of what it's going to be, and then it's capped to 2% a year growth like it was in California. That
Well, we do
solves
agree on
everything.
that.
Dakota's
We
not
do
paying
agree
for
on
it.
that, but I wanted Kevin Brady to take into account the equity interest of other people. All right, David, last question. Are you expecting the first year of the Trump presidency to be good for the economy and for investors?
I'm expecting a good year in the economy, and I expect public policy to incrementally add to the goodness of what will be in the economy. In other words, I never want to say that public policy is the number one driver of economic activity, for good or for bad, but I expect positive impact to the economy as a result of the Reaganite things that the Trump administration will do, which is lower taxes, deregulation, and better energy policy.
David Bonson, always a pleasure to have you. A happy Thanksgiving to you. What's the name of the book, David?
Full-time work and the meaning of life, fulltimebook.com, my friend.
Fulltimebook.com. I remember I was looking for it this morning, but Fulltime Book is a great Christmas present for everyone out there who wants to understand why we are made to work. Full-time work. Fulltimebook.com. Thank you, David Bonson. I want to tell everyone about Angel Tree. I need you to contribute to Angel Tree. I need you to take care of the children of moms and dads who are behind bars in prison. They get a present. They get a note from mom or dad. They get a visit from an Angel Tree visitor, and they get connected to Angel Tree. They get a Bible. They get all sorts of wonderful things. And I am here to tell you that there is nothing like Angel Tree to bring a smile on Christmas morning to the face of a child that deserves it. Please be as generous as you can. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Nobody can miss it. Nobody can miss it. Not even, I won't say it. I'm being nice to the Steelers fans. You can't miss it. The banner for Angel Tree. Please change the life of a child. $30. One child, Do 10 kids $300 and then do your own Christmas shopping. It's the week of the game, and Senator Tom Cotton is my guest. I don't think they actually have a rivalry in Arkansas. Do they, Senator?
Nothing like Ohio State, Michigan, Hugh. You know, that game holds a soft spot in my heart. It was, I guess, 18 years ago today that my platoon and I were sitting in Kuwait for a weekend, waiting for a ride back home from our time in Iraq. And we had a chance to watch the Michigan-Ohio State game there. I think that's when both teams were undefeated in number 1 and number 2 in 2006.
And I can't remember the game. Did the Buckeyes win?
I can't remember either, Hugh. I'm not as invested as you are. But there's
well, we
sitting
won.
sitting in the
That's an
clamshell
Urban
Kuwait.
Meyer year. And Urban was 7-0. Maybe that's before Urban. I have to go look. Tom Cotton, let's start with Israel. There's a ceasefire in Israel. It was imposed on the Israelis, in my view, and I think they did it in order to avoid a Security Council resolution like Obama did to them on his way out his door on December 22nd, 2016. What do you think is going on there in Israel?
Well, Hugh, I think it's probably worse than that. I think it's effectively blackmailed by the Biden administration trying to find anything, any kind of fake feather to put in its cap after 4 years of disastrous foreign policy. You know, in 2016, President Obama merely abstained from an anti-Israel resolution. From my understanding, President Biden was threatening to lead an anti-Israel resolution if Israel didn't capitulate to this so-called ceasefire. Second, Prime Minister Netanyahu cited the need to restock munitions over the next 60 days. That's also a result of President Biden's de facto partial arms embargo on Israel over the last few months. So when you have one side, Israel, that's on the front foot, has momentum, rooting out Hezbollah forces in southern Lebanon, and on the other side, you have Hezbollah that's knocked back and is pleading for a ceasefire. I don't see how imposing a ceasefire on Israel with effective blackmail can be deemed as anything other than a objectively pro-Hezbollah position that Joe Biden has taken. But it shouldn't be surprising because that's basically what Joe Biden has been doing for the last 4 years, siding with America's enemies and adversaries against our allies, most especially in the Middle East.
With one exception, I approved of his trip to Israel in the aftermath of the massacre, but then it's been backpedaling since. And it may be the worst administration for Israel that we have had since the beginning of the Jewish state, even worse than Barack Obama, because he had to hide his anti-Israeli feelings until his lame duck session. Nobody cares about that Security Council resolution. But I don't think Obama held up arms, did he?
Here and there, nothing on the extent that Joe Biden has done, and certainly not in the middle of existential wars after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Again, it's just part and parcel of the disastrous 4 years of Joe Biden's presidency that any objective observer would compare maybe unfavorably to Jimmy Carter's tenure and allowing Soviet Russia and our enemies to get on the march around the world. I think for decades to come, Joe Biden is going to go down in history along with Jimmy Carter as a disastrous foreign policy president. As Bob Gates said, he's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy, national security question for 40 years. That was 10 years ago. You can make it 50 years now, which is basically his entire time in life, which is sad and ironic in the fact that he views himself as some kind of modern-day Metternich, Talleyrand, and Castlereagh all rolled into one.
Now, he is the reverse of the Cavaliers. They're 17-1, and he's 1-17. He did go to Israel in the aftermath of the slaughter, and that was good. Other than that, he's been wrong about everything. Let's look forward, Senator. I think the 60 days might actually work to Israel's advantage in one way. I think they've got Hezbollah penetrated, or the IRGC penetrated, or Khamenei's inner circle penetrated, or all three. Now, you're on Senate Intel. You can't tell us, obviously, anything that is firm, but what do you think? They've hit everything, including last night. They took out all the UAVs and most of the cruise missiles in about 90 seconds. The Israeli Air Force doing amazing things last night before the ceasefire took effect.
I mean, I think in the end, 60-day pause in fighting, which I expect will probably renew because Hezbollah and Iran will not keep its promise. They never have. Remember, Hezbollah is doing now what it committed to doing 18 years ago, with his withdrawing north of the intelligence capabilities against the enemies on its borders, and it will begin to stockpile more munitions. And certainly, I would expect that to accelerate starting on January 20th. It seems to me that the Prime Minister and the government of Israel has made a decision in the last few months to settle all the family business with Iran and its terrorist proxies, and America should back them to the hilt in doing so.
What I told Leland,
I think you're right.
I told Leland Vittert last night, Brian Hook is running the transition for Senator Rubio. I expect maximum pressure to return. Do you, Senator Cotton?
I do, because Iran is now exposed on its flanks in a way it never has been. Even when President Trump's successful Iran policy came to an end 4 years ago, you still had Hezbollah that appeared strong and had over 100,000 missiles and rockets. Hamas had not yet been degraded. And look at where things now. Hamas is effectively destroyed as a fighting force in Gaza, and Hezbollah has been devastated. Not just its leaders, and frankly, like I don't even know who's leading Hezbollah these days, Hugh. And as you say, I'm on the intelligence committee. I couldn't tell you. Every time another one gets named, he seems to bite the dust within a few days. I mean, whoever is leading it must not have been important enough to have a beeper a couple months ago.
Senator, congratulations, by the way, on becoming the chair of the conference. Congratulations on becoming the chair of the Intel Committee. Now, my question is, in the Intel Committee, you'll review Tulsi Gabbard. And on armed services, you will be reviewing Pete Hegseth, and on judiciary, you will be reviewing Pam Bondi. Do you expect any of these nominees not to make it through?
I don't have any reason right now to foresee President Trump's nominees, a Republican president, not passing through confirmation of a Republican Senate, Hugh. Now, as you've heard many senators say, there's going to be the hearings. Every senator, including Democrats, will have a chance to ask their questions. They'll have a chance to do it in a classified setting for jobs where that's necessary and appropriate. There'll be time to ask questions for the record. I've spoken to all of the nominees that you just mentioned and many others. They're all committed to providing exactly that kind of transparencies and those answers to senators. But I expect we'll do that, not only do it, Hugh, but do it promptly. In 2017, President Trump only got 2 nominees through on the first day. In 2021, what goes around comes around. Joe Biden, I think, only got 1 or 2 as well. So both parties have made their point. We should go back to the traditional custom. In 2009, Barack Obama got 9 cabinet nominees confirmed in the first 48 hours. I would say that I would like to see that be at a floor for what will happen in the early days of the new Senate when Donald Trump is sworn in on January 20th. I, for one, expect to be holding hearings in the Intelligence Committee in the 17-day period, January 3rd, when the new Senate takes office, until Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th and can formally submit nomination papers. And then we should go right in after President Trump takes his hands off the Bible and gives what I'm sure will be an excellent speech. We should go right back to the Senate chamber and start confirming those nominees.
And get the budget reconciliation package done. I really hope that it's not business as usual. Last question. When do you expect the budget resolution to pass, Senator, and then the trailing bills to follow, including the Trump tax cut?
Well, I agree with you, Hugh, sooner rather than later. A lot of those tax cuts expire in the next year. Many of them are very important business provisions. So businesses, especially smaller businesses, need the kind of planning certainty for their taxes to make investments and hire more workers. I know that Senator Thune, our new majority leader, Senator Graham, the chair of the Budget Committee, Senator Crapo, the chair of the Finance Committee, are committed to moving as quickly as we can. We also have to deal, of course, with the House of Representatives, which has a narrow margin. And in some of these measures, they'll have to take the first steps under our Constitution. They either raise revenues or appropriate money. But I do expect that everyone is going to want to move as promptly as we can to give certainty and permanence to the American people, especially small businesses.
Senator Tom Cotton, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and have a wonderful, wonderful time. I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. I'll be gone next week, but I will talk to you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining me, and go Buckeyes.
Thank you, Hugh. Happy Thanksgiving all.
Will do. Now, let me remind everyone, David Bonson and I were talking about the deductibility of property taxes, the deductibility of mortgage interest. The latter is not impacted. The property taxes, I think, are going to get additional relief. My guest is from Ohio as well. Terry Pluto joins me, Dean of Ohio sports writer, longtime friend of the program. Hello, Terry. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Hello there, Hugh. Actually, there's part of Michigan I like. Are you
Uh-oh.
ready?
Oh, you go on vacation with Roberta to Michigan.
Yes, the Upper Peninsula, which
Yeah.
consider the fact that, let's see, I think the Upper Peninsula is probably farther from Ann Arbor than Cleveland.
I think you're right. Terry, I want to tell you, the
By
reason I had you on today is number one,
yes.
I usually say grace on Thanksgiving because I'm the senior man in the area. And I won't say I'm thankful for Terry's Talking, but I am. You and David Campbell do a fabulous job on Terry's Talking. I listen to it every week. I am thankful for your columns, which entertain me. I'm thankful for the podcast, but I am also thankful that you do prison ministry. And I'm raising money right now for Angel Tree Prison Fellowship. What do you do for prison ministry on Thanksgiving? Is there anything that goes on? Because we often think of prisoners at Christmas, but not at Thanksgiving.
Well, Hugh, I've actually the last few years I have switched totally over to the Haven Arrest, which is the city of Mission, the city mission in Akron. A lot of change came during the pandemic and that, but so that's where I'll be though tomorrow night, and basically every holiday, and we do services 2 to 3 times a month there. So whether you and Angel Tree comes into play there because a lot of those guys are coming in and out of prison, and unfortunately, we did it for 20 years, and I run into guys that I had 15 years ago that are kind of floating back and forth. But it's such a big deal. Anything you can do, the Chuck Colson thing and Angel Trees is a fabulous program, and I wouldn't say that unless I'd had personal. In other words, I've been involved with it. Our church, Arlington Church of God in Akron, we do a lot with Angel Tree and sort of all the others. So it's a best thing. But I mean, it's a tough time of year, whether you're in prison or you're going to be like tomorrow night at Akron's Haven Arrest, which is the city mission in Akron. Um, in fact, I've done a thing recently called the empty chair, where I put an empty chair up on the stage and said that, look, somebody's missing, or maybe that's you missing from your family or that. So it's a really tough time.
I read your column last week, the empty chair column. It's a pointed dagger at the heart, and I would recommend anyone to go just Google Terry Pluto in the empty chair. He writes a column on faith once a week for the Cleveland.com site. He's a sports writer, but he's also a very learned and smart guy when it comes to faith and life, and I appreciate that column. Now, I want to run down a list with you, Terry. This is a Thanksgiving show, and I'm going to tell you some names that I am thankful for, and then we're going to talk about them. Donovan Mitchell, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Terry Francona, Dennis Eckersley, Ray Fosse, Nick Chubb, Brian Sipe, Baker Mayfield, Bernie Kosar, Andre Thornton, Oral Hershiser, Clay Matthews, Dick Ambrose, Mark Price, Nate Thurman, Austin Carr, Joe Thomas, Joel Bitonio, Lenny Wilkins, Bill Fitch, Sam Ratigliano, Marty Schottenheimer, Jason Kipnis, Ozzie Newsome, and I want to end with Kevin Stefanski. What do those guys have in common? You've covered them all. What do they have in common?
It's a really wide-ranging list. I know just about all of them personally. It's your list, Hugh, so why don't you lead off and start?
Well, as a fan, not as a professional sports writer, as a fan, they were good men on the field and off. They were great examples of playing hard. They had no drama. They were just complete professionals who did their jobs, never complained as far as I know. I don't know if any of these guys held out. I can't remember Andre Thornton ever holding out. The reserve clause was probably around when Andre Thornton stands out because he lost his whole family in that terrible van crash and he came back. But now we're into Jameis, and I hope they keep Jameis for 2 years and draft a rookie. But they're all good guys, right? Sam Ratigliano, they're all good people. They're no drama. Isn't that wonderful to cover?
And on top of it, they embraced being in Cleveland, whether they're from this area, which Bernie Kosar was, being from your way out towards Warren. He was from Boardman. Yeah. Or they came here, like Andre Thornton grew up in the Philadelphia area, came here, and he still lives in the area. So those are guys that I think got it. In fact, a lot of people, probably even where you live on either coast, is this flyover country, et cetera. and then they spend some time here and they realize, gee, it's really nice not to have to sit an hour and a half in traffic every day going wherever you're going. And that, Cleveland, for example, is the smallest city with Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA. I'm thankful for that because I love covering the major sports, but I'm glad I don't have to deal with, say the Washington-Baltimore traffic or some of those.
Terry, I've only met one guy on this list. Actually, two. I've met Brian Sipe, who became a Christian after football, and we had lunch out in California one day. He said, no one in Cleveland would believe how I live now. And I met Dennis Eckersley at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I was so overcome by fan shyness, I mumbled. I couldn't say anything. I'm a professional talker, but he was a really nice guy. Am I wrong about anyone on this list being a good person, as far as you know?
No, I mean, Jameis Winston's a fascinating story because he had some off the field stuff with women when he was at Florida State in his early years in Tampa. But since then, since 2017, there's been nothing, and it's been just the opposite. For example, when he played in New Orleans for 4 years, he won the Ed Block Courage Award, which goes for character. It is voted by your teammates. He has pumped life into this dismal season, just with his attitude and also the fact that he can throw the ball well too. So that's one. Eckersley is fascinating also because he went through a period of heavy drinking. We'll talk about that. In fact, he told me when I wrote the book, Cursory Rock, that one of the things that turned him, he got drunk at his young daughter's birthday party. They taped it and showed it to him. And that's what really got him on the road to sobriety. So, that's really a cool thing to see. And then, and you're right. He is totally unpretentious. And I've always been thrilled about that. And then Stefanski is just a really, quote unquote, normal guy. By the way, Andrew Berry is too. They are, in terms of people, off the field, living it the right way. And despite all the problems the Browns have had this year in the past, that was always the rumors leaking out and who hated who and all the I remember Jimmy Haslam when they fired Hugh Jackson, and somebody else called it internal discord. I always liked that one. You knew that came from somebody in PR. Well, they haven't had internal discord. They've had problems winning games, and the Deshaun Watson thing has been a mess. But in terms of, I think, how Stefanski's handled all this stuff, I'm with you. I like him, and I hope they stick with him.
Now, I wanted to ask you as a sports writer, do you gravitate away from people who are drama, who are off the field? Odell comes to mind, but there are others in my long history of Cleveland fandom who I just don't like because it seems like the story is always about them. But there are superstars like Austin Carr who seem to be like real individuals on the court. And I was watching him back in the 70s. I don't get to hear the games very often that he broadcasts. But Joe Thomas, he's just a normal guy and a wonderful guy. Do you gravitate to them?
Yeah, and I'll tell you the other thing, Hugh. Generally, the drama queens and kings that come through here, you find out they don't play that well too. So they bring a lot of drama and they bring a lot of things that really do, kind of get to you. But when you go back and look at it, you say, all right, was it worth it? Odell Beckham wasn't worth it. And some of these other guys that kind of escaped me at the moment wasn't worth it. Deshaun Watson wasn't worth it. And as you mentioned, Joe Thomas or Andre Thornton, or we could go through most of those guys on that list, virtually all those guys on this list. They were very good at what they did. And I mean, Joe Thomas is a guy that went fishing on Lake Michigan on the day of the NFL draft because he just didn't want to go to New York and deal with all that stuff. And that's about how it's been ever since then. I remember Joe Thomas talking to him his last year. His knees were so bad. I mean, he told me I got about 5 hours a week that I could play football. So they get me for a couple hours and one practice. The rest I'm just kind of working with guys on the side and the game, and that was it. And it's a shame because Joe retired before actually like the 2020 team that made the playoffs, which he would have loved. And, he's an offensive lineman. By nature, offensive linemen usually are among the most thoughtful people on the team and most unselfish because they have to. And secondly, they know they better stick together, because when you notice them, when they blow a block, when a flag is thrown in their direction, rarely does anybody say. Everybody says Joe Thomas, boy, he was a great player, uh, a great tackle. Who watched him play? Really, I mean, other
Yeah.
than the Thomas families and the left tackle, that's it. So
Well,
I
I watched
agree.
DeJuan Jones because he's so big. I cannot not watch DeJuan Jones, and I hope he
Yeah.
recovers quickly. I want to ask you about owners. I like the Dolans. I think the Dolans do a fine job. I really like Mr. Jacobs, who put what was the Jake and now is Progressive Field there. I think I like the Haslams. I didn't like the Watson deal, but generally they've settled down after Johnny Manziel. But we've had some bad owners as well. I am wondering, we've had some bad sports writers too. Does the room divide the same way, the journalism room, as the locker room, into people who are negative and people who are positive?
Yes, because I think in any business that is how it rolls. Some people are upbeat, and I remember, I think it was my father said something to me one time and said, "Well, you at least give the guy time to screw up before you just bury him." And and that stuck with me. And if it wasn't him, it sounded like something he would say. And he was a warehouse guy, a World War II guy, that generation. And it's a really good thing. But on top of that, Hugh, with the way the internet goes, I mean, I can go right now on my computer, find out how many people read me in the last 10 minutes, last 2 hours, last 24 hours, how it compares to everybody else on the staff. So what does that do? As you know, in your business, it leads to, as they say, have a hot take, get people stirred up. But I have found, and I think you have too, the way you've done your job, take your shots when it's necessary and have your facts lined up. But don't just look to obliterate somebody every day of the week to get attention, because it wears off.
I also think, and I've been listening to Terry's talking, I think you've been doing it about 5 years now. When you find two people who are friends, and you've got a good editor in Dave Campbell, and it's a very balanced show, people want to listen to people go long if they're talking from an area of expertise. And when I don't know anything about basketball, I watch it. I really have no idea what they're doing. I have no idea how the plays are rolling. I just like to watch it. You know it. Dave Campbell knows it. I liked your idea, by the way, about getting rid of the corner shot, because I hate that shot. But do you immediately, when you listen to people talk about sports, know if they know what they're talking about or if they're just a fan?
Usually, no, I'm weakest on football, and Dave played high school football. He might even play a little bit of college. He was a lineman, so I often defer to him on that. And even when I'm interviewing sources and that, I always say, "Well, this is look, I don't know that much about it." And when I'm talking about the intricacies, the basketball and baseball, I played those in high school. It wasn't very good, but I did, and a little bit of college baseball, but also just having covered Major League Baseball for 6 years every day, and then the NBA for 7. It picked up a lot. And I will admit, sometimes I'm watching former players who are doing NBA games, and I'm going, I remember a veteran writer told me early on, he says, a lot of players just know how to play, but they can't even explain how the game works. And that's what I hear sometimes. They don't really give you, this is how it is. And uh, because so much of it is not just physical gifts, but just instinctual. So that's the thing there. I'm just so glad. By the way, you mentioned we were talking about good people. Donovan Mitchell and Jose
Yep.
Ramirez would be at the top of the current.
Oh, I missed
Yeah,
Jose should be on there, obviously. Yeah. Ooh.
he's thanked for that. I mean, my goodness, this guy, he's the one that should get the statue. Made the commitment to stay in Cleveland, from Bonnie, Dominican Republic, over near the Haiti border. Totally unpretentious. It's hard to even get him to do interviews. He just he doesn't care about it. And I know when he watched Frankie Lindor and a couple of his other friends have gone and played in big markets, and made it. I don't want to deal with that. He just wants to play ball, and he runs hard on everything. I mean, he's just such a great leader in that respect. And Donovan Mitchell is a chance to be the Jose Ramirez of the Cavaliers. He was traded here. He's from New York City. His dad was a minor league ball player. Donovan's dad currently works for the front office of the New York Mets in a business capacity. And Donovan, when he was traded by Utah, was hoping to go to New York. He didn't. He was instead traded to Cleveland. And he did nothing except be a class act. He waited when it was the best time to sign the extension to stay in Cleveland. He did it. He leads the team, not just in terms on the court, but he's continually lifting people up. And he goes to like Guardians games. He goes to Browns games. And this is a guy that could have gone the other way. You could have had the Odell Beckham or the drama, and it was just the opposite. So that's what's been fun of late. You franchises have
I
these
think
two
all
guys.
of these guys committed to Cleveland. Oral Hershiser wasn't there very long, but when he was there, he was all in. And those were big years for the Indians and now Guardians. And he was all in. Ray Fosse was all in. But the guy who defines it, I'm too young to remember Jimmy Brown. I never saw him play. We got season tickets in '65, of course. But Nick Chubb is Jimmy Brown. And I think you mentioned yesterday getting stronger every game and that it's a remarkable comeback. But he is a classy professional. I mean, he's just a professional in everything he does. I'm not sure if he's a great interview. I've never heard him interviewed, actually. It's like Jose. Does he give interviews?
Yeah, he does once a week. When you want Chubb to open up, ask him about somebody else. He's not going to be great on himself. But like when they signed Kareem Hunt and brought him in here, and Hunt was coming in with some off-field problems, Chubb took Hunt in, and really, I think he was taking some Bible studies there and just the whole thing. And if you notice, Hunt has not had any problems for years since then, playing for Kansas City now. He loves to talk about Kareem Hunt or who the quarterback or somebody else. It's just how he was raised down in Georgia. And you just, you don't blow your own horn. You don't even pick it up. But if somebody else asks you about them, you become a whole symphony of praise. And so that's the way he is really aligned. And the fact he's on the field, he was amazing. Within 3 months, he had an ACL operation and an MCL, and I'm sure they were cleaning out some scar tissue and that from a big knee injury he had back at University of Georgia when he was still in college. So I am astounded he's back on the field. We won't know the real Nick Chubb till next year, but I'll say this: he's taking out his frustration sometime when you watch him, and it says in the backfield and somebody's trying to blitz the quarterback. He's nailing these rushers. I mean, boy, he always blocked. He's fierce now.
He's not Wyatt Teller, but he's close. Here's where I want to close, Terry, and why I asked you to come on today. Thanksgiving tomorrow, people will thank their family. They'll be grateful for the blessings in their lives. They'll be grateful to God if they're believers. I am curious, other than Roberta and your parents, who are you grateful for your career, which is as long and longer than mine, actually, by a year, but you've been doing what you love to do for a long time, and that's a great blessing. Who gave you the breaks along the way?
Well, when I was hurting for a job coming out of Cleveland State, and even though I'd worked part-time at the old Cleveland Press and sold stories to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, this was the late 70s, and there were no jobs. A guy named Erwin Smallwood hired me at the Greensboro Daily News, and that gave me an opportunity to work at a mid-market paper, which was very good at that time. And when I was there, I met a guy named Will Browning. And then later on, I left Greensboro and went to the Savannah Morning News to do minor league baseball and that. And Will Browning just happened to be at a Maryland Duke basketball game, and a guy named Bill Tanton was a friend of his. And Bill Tanton said, I just lost my baseball writer. I need a baseball writer for the Baltimore Evening Sun. Basically, he said, do you know somebody young, cheap, and good? And Will Browning handed him my name and phone number, and I get a call out of nowhere from the Baltimore Evening Sun. That's back when they had two papers with the Sun, and said, I got your name from Will Browning. Would you come up and interview? I just lost my baseball writer to the Washington Star. Would you come up and interview? I'm like stunned. At first, I wanted to make sure it wasn't a joke. And I interviewed and got the job. And so suddenly I'm covering the major leagues at the age of 24 with Earl Weaver in that. So
With
that
Earl
whole
Weaver,
thing,
Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar. You know, whenever you talk about Ben Lively, I always think of
yeah,
Mike Cuellar because they didn't have any stuff, but they win. But you got to go to
yeah,
work because of a guy who told a guy that you were the guy.
exactly.
That's
I was the
remarkable.
guy, and at that time I wasn't nearly as close to the Lord I'm not, but it is remarkable. And to be able to see that, because then once you get into quote major league journalism, you're there and you show you can do it. And on top of it, I think having the Orioles at Earl Weaver my first time in, because Weaver was like going to baseball graduate school. I mean, this is the guy that invented batting averages of pitchers versus hitters, and a lot of early Moneyball stuff came right from his knowledge and the way he looked at it. So, and he loved the writers back then. It was a different game because you didn't have all the internet stuff, so you, you could sit around sometimes talk to him 20, 30 minutes before games. I mean, it really was just astounding and set me up later on to go and do other things. And I was really grateful late in my career. Two people, Susan Goldberg and Deborah Adams Simmons. I was at the Beacon Journal, and this is in 2007, and they called and asked me to come back to the Plain Deal where I'd been earlier, which really helped because unfortunately the Beacon Journal was, like a lot of papers, really struggling. And I went through, Hugh and Mike, from 1999 till about 5 years ago. I went through 12 rounds of layoffs and 4 sales of papers. Three of them were at the Beacon Journal. So I am thankful just to survive from all that, because it doesn't matter if you're good or not. They don't have to keep you.
Yeah, what's amazing though, not only survive, thrive. I don't know how good Terry's Talking is doing. I think it's doing very well given that there are advertisements in there, but it's fabulous listening. So thank you. Pass on my thanks to Dave. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving tomorrow and a good time down at the mission. And thank you for saying a good word about Angel Tree as well. I first heard about prison ministry from you talking about Bill Glass. And that's
Yes.
another good guy who's not on my list. I had his card, but I don't remember him playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill was with the Browns in the 60s and just a great pass rushing defensive end. They would have loved him right now because he would have been one of those rushing specialists to come off the bench. For years, he had the Brown sack record. And then for the last 40 some years of his life, he devoted it to prison ministry.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Terry Pluto, thank you for everything you do for me and making my life entertaining and enjoyable, and for Terry's Talking, and also for your faith column in the empty chair. Very meaningful to a lot of people this season. You have a great Thanksgiving, and my best to your wife, who someday I will get to meet. Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome, Hugh.